Block printing has an important history in the Americas and has been used in diverse places and circumstances here. Graphicstudio at the University of South Florida conducts research into all printing techniques and makes frequent use of block printing in the creation of original art. In order to contribute to an understanding of the medium, Graphicstudio convened a colloquium on block printing in the Americas. A consideration of the occasions and circumstances in which block printing has been used, a critical analysis of its contributions, and a look to its future in the art and culture of the Americas. Block printing is a simple technique in which the area to be printed in ink is left intact, and the areas that are to be blank paper are cut away from the surface. Block printing has been used as a preferred technique by artists having widely different intentions. The technique serves those artists wanting a rapid and boldly communicative mark, as well as artists who demand of the medium the most subtle of aesthetic nuances. Block printing lends itself to widely distributed public images and to the most private of expressions.
The possibilities that exist in something that I thought for a long time was quite narrow, and it's not narrow at all. Based on even the conversations we had this morning about technology, and it was interesting because I didn't hear anyone speak of the block as technology, but at one point historically this was cutting-edge technology.
This technique of image making and printing requires little technology. In fact, is usually accomplished on a domestic scale, requiring a block, a knife, and a chisel, ink, and paper. As such, even today, block printing is often practiced in the Americas, often being used by artists working against the grain of the culture, by individuals who don't have access to mechanized presses, or under circumstance of marginalization.
The print has this capacity to be, in a sense, a storehouse, like an archive. It can become, in a sense, a historical archive, and that's something that I think is very important to the field of printmaking in the Americas.
I think something that is very interesting that I actually realized it through the symposium is how structural woodblock printing is to the development of an identity.
We can say that together with cartographical documents, maybe prints and woodblock prints more specifically, they constructed in a wider sense the first images of America, the first visual images of America.
How the woodblock prints done by German artists to inventory both the geographical conditions, the botanical, the ethnographic, these inventories in a way created an image of America that that in a certain way contributed to establish a mythology, because the scientific view on America was also nurtured upon an idea of a mythology of America. So these scientific depictions are always on this strange edge where fact and fiction or a romanticized view are connected.
The story of the Virgin of Guadalupe is central to the history of Mexico and is characteristic of the complex nature of identity in the Americas. In the middle of winter, not many years after the conquest, the miracle relates, a Nahuatl man, Juan Diego, walked along a barren path near the ruins of a pre-Columbian temple. He encountered the Virgin, who, as a token of her presence and power, presented him with a bouquet of roses. When he told of the encounter to the bishop and unwrapped the roses from his mantle, to everyone's amazement, the Virgin's exquisite image was there on the cloth. The history of the Americas as a world with a distinct hybrid identity, the product of mixed origins, begins with an act of printing. At the moment in which the roses of the European Virgin are pressed onto the fabric of Juan Diego Serape, symbolically transferring a new image and an altered valence to the indigenous world of the goddess Tonantzin, near whose temple the roses grew, the nature of the new world is registered.
I was told, don't bother with Mexican prints. No one looks at Mexican prints. But it's such a vital part of being a citizen of this hemisphere that you have to know more about the hemisphere. That you, at the Whitney, I've been very, very careful to find out the definition of American. I mean, it's a word we have in the United States of America and co-opted. I have many friends in Mexico and from Cuba and from South America, and they refer to themselves as American. It's a hemispheric name. We're all American.
The first images of America, widely seen in Europe, were woodblock prints. This technique, quickly realized by a skilled block cutter and efficient for printing hundreds of impressions, was a perfect medium for developing images to satisfy the curiosity of a population hungry for news of the New World. These impressions in ink on paper by European block cutters and printers were often made as illustrations for texts about the New World. Based on ink drawings or imagined from the verbal accounts of returning explorers, and very rarely on direct experience, these images were altered by the practical and conceptual distortions of layers of interpretation. They document the European imagination of America as much as America itself. However, these images, at first printed in Europe, but very soon after European conquest, printed at the newly established presses in the New World, became the source of American colonists' images of themselves and their world. This exoticized view of the Americas took root and has for centuries been an obstacle to a self-determined view of what America is and who, as Americans, we are. The early maps are fantastic exercises of the human imagination, and woodblock printing served as a way to bring image and words to a single matrix. Their aspiration is to place all the world in an abstract and two-dimensional plane. This aspiration is ambitious, as it attempts to place the unknown into the framework of the known. The attempt is evident to place America into the same gridded meridians as the known world. Yet the difficulty of this rational endeavor is apparent. Sea serpents rise from the waters. Along the margins of the map, the cities and people of the New World are depicted as alternately Europeanized or barbaric. The nature of American identity is a gripping and vital issue today, just as it has been in our unreconcilable past. Pluralistic, socially stratified, strained by issues of migration, race, newness is still part of the American identity. Who we are and what our world is both seem yet to be determined. Our identity is fluid and still unformed. In seeking to understand the nature of our work in this old but always fresh-seeming undertaking of printing, we find in the printed works of the Americas the patterns of use and utility, the need for innovation, and the vibrations of urgency that define our contemporary work. The persistence of a duality of pragmatism and transcendentalism in the motivations of printmaking and the motivation of our hemisphere is astonishing. We have in this medium evidence of our dispositional and historical origins and a tool to redefine our American identity.
You know, the dream, I guess, I have for all of this stuff is the statement that I made when I opened my talk. And that is that I think the Americas, not America, but the Americas, are a quilt. And the thing that binds that quilt together is the creativity of our humanity. The thing that I think, the glue that is the stitching of that quote, if you will, is the respect and the understanding gained through culture. And I think if those two things are lost, we no longer have a quilt, we have a stack of rags.
I hope that the aspiration of the Americas should be treating itself well. America doesn't treat itself well. Sometimes the countries don't treat their neighbors well. The elite doesn't treat the people well. So I think there is a forgetting of itself, of the America. And maybe America should remember of itself and remember with generosity.
Before they trace the original drawing, they have to prepare the stone first. And they have to grind it and file it smoothly as possible. And then paint it with a house paint, with white. And then trace the image, original drawing, trace it onto the stone. After tracing, use Indian ink, black ink, to trace the image to the stone. And after it's dry, we cut it. We cut the image. The whole white part, we cut it off and leave the ink part in. We cut the stone with tools, chisels, some handmade, some ordered. I printed with oil-based ink, with rollers. I might try a few proofs, 2 or 3 proofs. We don't use press back home, but we use special hand tools to press down the image. The real harpoon head usually is plain. I designed these little markings here. It's from my head. That's how I work. A printer. It's independent or some. I could try to find other words, but this is much more relaxing for me, and it's fun.
Agora, convém lembrar que escrever cordel não é assim simples. É preciso que o cordel tenha o cheiro de povo, seja agradável. Então, se agrada, é como um romance, um livro qualquer. Então, se agrada, uma revista bonita, se agrada, compra. Né? É semelhante ao cordel. Então, a gente procura estar dentro daquele plano. É certo que às vezes a gente publica cordel político e pode haver problemas, né?
He's saying that cordel literature is like any other literature, like a romance, like any other book, has to have the smell of the people. It has to smell like people. People has to like it, or it's not effective. And he also said that sometimes cordel can be a big problem. It happened to him many times. He was telling me, because you can write a cordel about a politician or about the political situation right there, right at the time, and you can get in big problem because of that.
This is not grand art. This is people art, people literature. This is the real backbone of the of being a human and expressing yourself. And Abrao is marvelous because the images that he does are incredible. They're holy pictures. There's a whole series of little cordels that he has here that show the Padre Cicero. And there's one about Padre Cicero's birth, and Padre Cicero doing something, and a miracle associated with him. So these are reactions to events that go on.
Nós podemos chamar o cordel como jornal diferente, né? Antes, no início do século, a dificuldade de comunicação de jornais era muito grande e este era justamente o veículo ideal.
Oh, because in the beginning of, a long time ago, the communication was very difficult. The newspaper was hard to get and hard to make it. So Cordel was a kind of communication, kind of newspaper, newsletter.
This is one about the funeral of Luis Gonzaga. And as you can see there, this is Abrao's very interesting image to illustrate the poetry that he wrote about Luis Gonzaga. And what's very interesting, down here you have Abrao's initials, A-B-B. And if you look at how he's cut them here, it's almost like it's the wind blowing. He's using it, interpreting in this form as if the wind is blowing this funeral, this coffin that's carrying Luis Gonzaga on the back of 4 birds. So it's like the wind is blowing. He doesn't cut, the whole background is cut with these very sophisticated sort of chevron shapes. One would wonder if Jasper Johns would have loved to have, this is not what Jasper Johns saw for Fizzles and for that wonderful period where he's working with cross-hatching in the 80s. But it's the same kind of very sophisticated use of background and shape. And it's very typical of Abrao's work. He thinks in terms of these little 6-line poems. They all string out together, little essays done in a rather, it's a poetical style.
There are hundreds of thousands of printmakers in Japan, so printmaking in Japan is pretty much major medium among artists, and that means more accessible to the public. That also means that I think there are some reasons. One is that print is usually small, and then price is cheaper, and as you know, Japanese house is small, so that they can hang the prints in their home. The reason I decided to come to the States, as I said, that the traditional woodblock printing, ukiyo style is pretty much limited. So I thought it's much better to come to the States because I would have more opportunity. Because it's not really well known, this kind of method in the States. So maybe I should get to know more artists, and then in collaboration, I would make more interesting prints, which I would never be able to do if I keep living in Japan. There's not much of an alternative way of thinking, to develop something new, some new style by using traditional printmaking. They don't have that kind of idea. They just stick around, to reproduce some old, worn-out idea. Well, what I want to do with this method as a printer is that, of course, totally collaboration, total involvement within printmaking with artists and printer, and more dialogue between them. That's what I want to have in the future, if it's possible. At the same time, as I said, I have to pursue the more possibility of this printmaking because there's so few people who demonstrate this kind of method. So I think it's kind of my duty, to keep doing this.
Wood itself, I think wood just historically has been both accessible and it's been a very convenient material to use to create a matrix from which to do impressions. And it goes back to Babylonian times when they used carved stuff to print designs on mud bricks, and basically it's been used continuously in human history as a matrix. I think wood is both a renewable resource and a valuable one, but I think that policies of harvesting are not too wonderful. I mean, in terms of the finer woods, the exotic woods, which pear comes under the category now, they're not all that endangered for the most part because they're not really used that much for anything. This is a pear block, and actually, it's a beautiful wood. It's a rather subtle wood, and as I said, it cuts and holds detail real well. It inks beautifully, and it is most advantageous if you were going to be a craftsperson cutting a meticulous brush or pen and ink drawing. I make mention that plywood is a highly desirable media, and I've often used Luan plywood, particularly if that was done on Luan, and I'm cutting it and thinking, am I being ecologically responsible here?
So, in the 19th century, woodblock prints as well as other reproductive techniques were central to the circulation of images between Europe and America.
In the 15th and 16th century, block printing was a German art tradition, and Durer's greatest achievement as a printmaker was single-handedly to have resuscitated the woodcut and reinstate it as a major artistic medium.
Here you have the artist working on painting a large mural of the six-pointed star with the hammer and sickle, with two soldiers on either side. And the purpose of this image is to point out that the artist is as much a soldier as a soldier.
But I just wanted to do something big, and I didn't have a press at home. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to do a big block because I had the linoleum, and so I built up in fact, I've done something that's like about 6 feet long on fabric, but I didn't bring one of those. So what I would do is build up my linoleum with all kinds of, I collage it basically. I mean, there was a theme throughout, but it was basically collage.
I started as a printmaker, and I developed as a book designer. It was natural to me. And then I became a printer of books also. That was an old dream. I had to wait long because I live in an island where I didn't have, that part of the tradition was not developed. And at this moment, I'm the only one doing it like that with letterpress, printing, and binding by hand.
As a printer, I felt very attracted to Graphicstudio, but being here and seeing what is the body of Graphicstudio, what I've seen in the walls and talking to the people that are here, I think that it would be very good to have these links between Oaxaca and Graphicstudio, as Graphicstudio is a place that is alive and full, with constant investigation on the media. And I feel that Oaxaca has a lot of artists. They're working, but they're not very familiar with the new media.
Y también estudié un poco de todo lo que fue la filografía del grupo del Puente, de Kirchner, Kokoska, Emil Nolde, toda esa generación también de vanguardia, ¿no? Que a mi parecer también ellos ese tipo de vanguardia se mezcló con una historia también latinoamericana, un tipo de tradición que había en Cuba sobre el grabado de los años 30, 40, que era de alguna manera un tipo de caricatura política, muy figurativa, muy irónica, ¿no? Era una especie de parábola. Entonces yo creo que más o menos todas esas ideas han ido llenando mi trabajo xilográfico, ¿no? Son muchos detalles que están unidos en el resultado de mi investigación, como de la xilografía en sí misma, ¿no? Y por supuesto la xilografía también lleva un trabajo físico, ¿no? Con el que yo me identifico mucho, ¿no? Es la idea de la incisión, de la desaparición de una matriz vacía, ¿no? De enfrentarte a un vacío y que luego se vuelve un múltiple, ¿no? Es un proceso también interesante de todo el proceso de la xilografía. Así.
Printing is very complex. I don't know if maybe printing is the most complex of all arts, no? Because print can be the very simple act of just pressing a potato like was James Brown, no? And create an image with meaning behind that. Or it can also absorb very complex languages and simplicity at the same time.
And I do believe this notion of being able to share with a very, in a sense, humble print technique, relief printing, which is a very humble technique, but it's a technique with a tremendous history. Seeing that, I think, that we can communicate through something that simple, the richness of our humanity, whether we're talking about the art of this morning or the art of Brazil, the art of Jamaica, or the art of New Orleans and New York. I think it gives us an opportunity to see into each of our humanities. That's what I would dream of for the future. You know, it's a hell of a dream.